Welcome to Into the Filmverse, a movie fan podcast where we talk about all things movies. I'm Mytchel Chandler.
And I'm Bryce Payne.
And today we are talking about a 1973 French animated film called Fantastic Planet and talking about our thoughts on Marvel in general. So we're going to jump into here and talk about Fantastic Planet. I'm going to throw over to you, Bryce, so you can just give a little bit more about what this film is about.
Cool. So this is a 1973 hand-drawn animated film that follows the group of drags, it depends on your version. French spell it drags, but it's trags, and they're small little pest species named Ohms. The Ohms are basically humans, us, human people, who are used as pets by the drags.
Weird.
The drags are incredibly scientific, way more advanced than us, and view us as vermin.
Yeah, that was one of the first things that when I saw in this film, that basically they treated humans very similar to ants or like miniature dolls.
It's interesting though, because it starts off with our main boy being a baby, being carried by his mother, and basically getting tortured by Ohms or by drags. They're being tortured by the drags, and they kill the mother.
So if you look at a poster I guess if you look up this film at all, the drags are, or how do you pronounce the name, are going to be the giant blue creatures with the red eyes
that look vaguely human, but also kind of fish-like.
And also like, yeah, exactly, alien fish, like weird looking. Honestly, I'll use that word a lot when I'm talking about this film, weird, because that's what it is. It's weird. But it actually has an interesting story once you get past like the first 10 minutes or so and get past the weirdness of, humans being called ohms and being these little tiny creatures that are controlled by, or, taken advantage of and controlled by these giant creatures. And then also just like the lore behind the creatures, you start to get into this like sci-fi battle for humanity.
Kind of interesting, right?
Yeah, and it gets really interesting.
So the movie has Tiwa, who is the daughter of this kind of master guy, this like noble drag.
Yeah.
And she takes the baby after his mother dies and decides she wants to keep it as a pet. Now, something you need to keep in mind is a week in the trag's life is a year in the ohm's life.
Yeah, so time passes much faster for us humans, ohms, than it does for the drags, yeah.
And so you see Tiwa take care of the baby, who she names Terror. And she is doing her best, honestly, to try to take care of it. She views it more as like a toy than anything else. But she's very protective of him. Like there's a scene near the beginning where they have these other drags who are using their humans to fight each other, like the ohms to fight. And kind of like a Fight Club type thing. They put them in the hill and they just try to duke it out. And they want her Terror to fight. And she's like, no, I'm good. He'll get hurt. So she actually genuinely like cares about his well-being, it seems. But still views it more as like like he's so cute, he's a little pet. But she gives him a little house, she takes care of him, bathes him, does all that. Meanwhile, the drags have their whole system where they have like this meeting block, which is kind of cool. I like this scene a lot. They're on like the meeting, and there's like a group of drags in the top, and then you see their faces on the side of the block.
Yeah.
And where like they're showing the general populace what they're talking about. But it's interesting because it's like the general populace have no say.
Yeah, I mean, I like that too. I mean, at least you can actually see the conversations that these world leaders have for them. It was interesting.
And then they talk about de-omanizing, where they basically like go through and like kill all the wild ohms.
It's just genocide.
And it's kind of funny how they do that to me. It shouldn't be funny, but it's funny because they're just like, they view them like, oh, we do it every 3 cycles. And they're like, well, they reproduce too fast to do it every 3. We need to do it more.
Yeah, basically, yeah, the whole concept is these aliens are seeing that humans are reproducing too fast, and that in wild number, being wild ohms are humans, that they actually pose a threat to the aliens.
Yeah, it's kind of like the rabbits. They multiply so fast like rabbits.
Exactly.
But while this is happening, we see Terror get taken care of by Tiwa. And there's multiple things that happen is Terror has a collar that she can control to like drag him back to her whenever he tries to get away. And so there's like a malfunction in the collar. So she has this learning device where she puts it on her head and it's like telepathically tells her, like teaches her. And his device picks up that learning wave. So he is actually getting more intelligent as she's getting intelligent. So it's very interesting to see him kind of learn their culture and learn their language, learn how to read, learn how to their style of stuff. making him incredibly smart compared to the other Ohms.
Right.
And so you see a point where it gets to, they're just like, yo, you need to like get rid of him. Like he gets too. They decided that he doesn't need to be there. So he's like, I can't really learn much anymore by being here, so I'm gonna leave.
Mm-hmm.
And so he takes the collar and he leaves. He runs into a group of wild Ohms who kind of think he's weird. Because he's dressed in like this outfit that she put him in, and he's got these big weird feet, and he looks very off-putting. And then you see the Ohms with all their kind of like caveman type stuff.
Right.
But he becomes I don't want to like a leader, where he uses the collar to start teaching the wild Ohms how to be smarter.
Right.
Kind of a message of like, we can learn and become better.
Mm-hmm.
And so we start seeing the Ohms start to kind of rebel against the Trags.
Yeah, no, 100%. And then I know that pretty much, shortly after that, it's a matter of like some Ohms believe that they want to learn from that device, and the other ones don't want to learn from the device. And
yeah, because they think it's like trap or something.
Yeah, exactly.
They're like, we don't need them, and the guy's just like, but like we can learn to read. Like, don't open that box. It's a bad box. And then they open it and they died. He's like, see, I told you. Like, this is why it's important.
I think we also got to talk about too how there's this setup from the very beginning of the drag or the aliens have this meditation thing that they do, where they meditate and their consciousness gets put into this ball that floats in the air and starts floating somewhere. No, we don't really find out to the end of what it is.
It's like their minds get put somewhere else.
Exactly. And so we're not really sure what the purpose of that is until really that you realize the humans find out what the purpose of that is at the end, and they use that to their advantage to take over the drags.
Well, not take over, live in unity. They give another planet to the Ohms.
That's true.
But so before we get to there is they start talking about how they need to extinct the Ohms. There's too many. So we get the scene where like the Ohms actually kill a Trag. Like they come together and they attack it and they take it down. Like
I was surprised.
Alive. And then that begins a whole cycle of the Trag being like, yo, we need to kill them because they're actually able to kill us now.
I was surprised. I think that was only like a teenager was able to take down.
Yes.
It didn't seem like it was a full adult, but still, they don't know that, probably.
And so they decide like, hey, we need to escape this planet because they're trying to destroy us. So you get the Ohms start to develop rockets,
and
they leave. They take the rockets, they fly into space, and they go to this, I can't remember what they called it. I think it's the Fantastic Planet, the title planet, the Fantastic Planet.
Mm-hmm.
And they get there and they find these statues. They're just marble statues. But that's where the consciousness goes when they do the meditation. So they go with like other beings from other planets and they dance.
Yeah, quote unquote dance.
Quote unquote dance.
I saw it as coitus, but
but so it's kind of interesting that they figure out that those statues they can use to destroy the Drags, and then they find a way to live in harmony because the Drags are like, yo, so these guys could actually destroy our civilization because it takes too long for them to reproduce and their lifespans are so long that the Drags could just destroy them.
Right.
Or not Drags, the Ohms. The words get confused, but the Ohms could destroy their whole civilization if they don't get along. So they create like a second planet for the Ohms to live on.
Yep. Yeah. Exactly. So I mean, I guess at the end of it all works out for everybody. But ultimately, I just saw it as like the humans and Ohms were just like rising up and creating a stance against these aliens that they ended up defeating.
So now that we've talked about the whole movie, like the whole plot, that's it. That's the whole movie. It's like 67 minutes long. It's short.
Mm-hmm.
But what would you say that the message they're trying to convey? Because my grandma, I watched this with my grandma. It's not the best movie to watch with my grandma, but she asked me that question. I was like, I really don't know.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing.
So I looked it up, and apparently a lot of people think it's an allegory about animal rights and human rights along with racism.
I was gonna say something about like humans treating like lesser beings horribly. I mean that's kind of the only thing you think of.
And it becomes kind of the one person said that it is a theory of how do you like it?
Yeah.
Kind of like you see the humans getting crushed by these superior beings, and they're like, well, now how do you feel? If there's a bigger fish than you, how do you feel now?
Yeah, I mean that's exactly. No, I definitely see that. angle from that. What I think about this film, in general, I mean, just in general, is that I know that hand-drawn animation. We watched Wolfwalkers, which is an episode you can actually listen to now. Was that it didn't work for me that well, the hand-drawn animation, but this one I think it lent to the story very well.
So if I remember, it has been a long while since I've done a lot of research into this film. If I remember, this is one of the first hand-drawn animated films.
Oh wow!
Like, not first hand-drawn like ever, because obviously you had like Disney doing their hand-drawn cell animations, things like that. But this style of animation was like a first for France people.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of like an interesting little experiment that kind of got more popular as the years have gone by.
Wow.
Even getting to the point where it is in the Criterion Collection, which is where I watched it for the first time.
Yeah, like I said, I think this was definitely a weird film, but it was still engaging, and by the end of it, I actually ended up enjoying it.
Funny enough, it is actually based on a book from 1957
called Ohms and Siri.
Ohms and Siri, or Ohms Linked Together.
I just like that. I just really liked seeing the humans as lesser than and having to fight up to this really giant, almost unstoppable force.
I think it definitely made it more entertaining to watch. Now, this is just a sidebar. What did you think of all the like nudity that was just blatantly here?
I thought it was hilarious. I mean, I thought it was hilarious, honestly. At first, I was like, "Oh, they're really doing that," and then, yeah, I mean, then every time there was like just nipples everywhere.
Dude, I was surprised. I honestly forgot because I loved this movie when I watched it the first time. I thought it was fantastic. Fantastic, man. But watching this again and then sitting there knowing my 76-year-old grandmother's watching it, and then I was just sitting there. I was like, "Oh," and she was like, "Bryce," and I was like, "I don't know. It's weird. I don't know what to tell you." Like,
there was a scene where like I think like all the Ohms like got together and all the women like just took all their clothes and ran, and then all the guys started chasing them, and I was like, "Okay." That's what we're doing right now. And then I think as soon as that happened, I don't know if it faded or if that was when they started the de-ohming or they started like a lot of this imagery is super not explorative, but like just very different. Like there are a few scenes when like you would focus on the aliens or the drag, and it was just weird. Like there was one scene where they're just shifting shapes into like a wall and colors and like things, that you just had like all different types of shapes and like organic life just like that looked weird, and it was just a lot of like different imaginative animation.
A lot of that seemed very unnecessary at times too.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was just like randomly like in the background you would just have like this bird, the creature just like attacking something, and you're just like, why? Like why was this so important to put in? Like it's cool to watch. It feels so weird to watch it though. Like,
it almost makes it feel like a survival movie, like a survival on an obscure planet.
now, funny enough, speaking of weird imagery, I saw a review where somebody gave this like a really bad review. Not on Letterboxd. It was like I can't remember where I was reading about while I was watching the movie because I was trying to figure out like the allegory and stuff. This guy was like, "Yeah, I don't know, man. Maybe it'd just be a good movie if you watch if you're just like blazed out or something." Like, basically, like you need drugs to appreciate it. And I was like, I don't think that's true.
No, I mean there's like definitely films that lend themselves better to that, or just I mean don't do drugs, kids. But I say that this one it actually just lends itself as its own film. I think maybe the not having a language barrier there with just reading the subtitles.
I didn't have that problem.
No, I don't know if it was a problem. I'm saying for some people it might be. I don't have the problem, but
I just laugh because I watched it the first time in French,
right.
And this time around I had my Criterion disc and I was like, "There's an English dubbing. I'm gonna watch the English dubbing." But I honestly think the French version is the way to go because there's like I had subtitles on, and I was just like, I feel like I'm missing so much of this movie because there'd be subtitles going, but no one would be talking, and I'd just be like, so am I just supposed to guess that that's happening? Like, what if you don't have subtitles on? You wouldn't know half the stuff that's happening in the movie because they're not talking.
Weird. Yeah.
But it's definitely one of those more unique animated films, I feel.
Yeah, me too. I definitely think so.
One of like 3 or 4 that are in the Criterion Collection.
I definitely would watch it just to get like a cool breadth into another culture. I guess not culture, but just not American animation.
A little glimpse into it and how different things are.
And it's only an hour, 12 minutes or so it's not that long to watch.
I know. I actually forgot it was that short, and then when we were like planning when to watch it, and I was like, well, at least it's only like an hour long.
Exactly.
It's a nice little spurt. Like just sit down, spend an hour watching it. I'm like, all right, yeah, that's kind of cool.
Well, have you seen Fantastic Planet? Do you plan on watching it? Or do you never plan on watching it? I don't know. Just give me your thoughts on this film. I can't wait to talk to you guys about it there.
Honestly, it's an hour long. I just watch it just for the visuals.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you just turn it on silent, keep it in the background, just keep looking over once in a while.
Whoa, what's that?
What is that? Exactly. It reminds me a little bit of how, like, have you ever been, Meow Wolf? I don't know if you guys ever heard that or been there.
It's a art exhibit that's in like New Mexico, Denver, Colorado, and Las Vegas.
Yeah, there's a bunch. I think there's a few of them across the state. But if you've ever been to Meow Wolf, it definitely has that vibe to it.
The strangeness of the world.
Yeah, it's just all very strange. But awesome. Well, I'd love to hear what you guys think. And now we're gonna talk about Marvel. I know, super basic, but we wanted to kind of just talk about our thoughts on the franchise. Where our initial thoughts on Marvel came from, our thoughts now, exploring kind of just anything like that. So, Bryce, I'm gonna start with you. Let me I guess we'll just talk about just your introduction to Marvel, and I guess we'll kind of go from there.
So I came to the Marvel game late. I'm sure we've talked about this before.
Mm-hmm.
I was not into Marvel until 2016.
Okay.
Which is blasphemy for a lot of long-time Marvel fans because they're just like, what? But I did not really watch any Marvel films until Civil War. And the only reason I watched Civil War is because Spider-Man.
Wow.
Because I saw the trailer where he flips in on the car and he's like, hey, guys. Mm-hmm. And I was like, Spider-Man. I love Spider-Man. But so I was very late. And even after Civil War, I didn't even watch Doctor Strange in theaters. Like, I had no interest.
Wow.
But after that, I started my project of trying to watch them all. And I grew to love it. And then, obviously, 2017, 2018, 2019, biggest years of Marvel. Phase 3 was insane.
One time to come on, too.
And I was like, I love this. Because it felt like a huge community. Like, it felt like a milestone events. Like, oh, my God, new Marvel movie. And everybody be like, oh, my God, Marvel. Which I feel has since subsided a little bit. Ever since Endgame came out, I feel like the community has kind of died down a bit. But it's honestly a shame to see because they used to be the most hyped releases. Mm-hmm. I used to request days off from work. Like I used to be like, I can't work Friday.
I do for certain films.
I'm going to the premiere of this movie and I'm not waking up at 6
I did that too, yeah.
Like it was such a huge thing that I would go out of my way to make sure I had that time to go watch it because it felt like a huge event.
Yeah.
And after Endgame, post Endgame, I feel like that's kind of subsided a little bit. Now it's like, oh yay, Marvel, because it just doesn't feel the same anymore.
Yeah, we'll have to go into our post, I guess, Endgame thoughts. I'll just take just a second. Yeah, I started out 2008 was Iron Man. Very much. I mean, even before that, X-Men. I mean,
I loved X-Men, Spider-Man. Like those were the pillar, but MCU was very, very late because I kind of got out of the whole yay superheroes because I was just like, because it was like you got things where it was X-Men was good,
yeah,
Spider-Man was good. I loved Blade, but then you would get things like Ghost Rider and Daredevil and Elektra, and then it was like such a hit and miss and messy kind of system that was just like, I don't really care.
Yeah, I would say I definitely was there for Avengers and I was there for Iron Man and Thor. Like I vividly remember all those films, but at the same time, like I don't think my really conscious like appreciation of these films started until Age of Ultron. Mostly because I think for Age of Ultron, I was at like this movie party they had in our local theater, and it was like super cool. They were giving out like prizes, and it made it like an event, like a real event. It was really cool.
Don't you miss when movies used to do that thing? Like we've been to a couple early screenings where they do kind of like that similar thing, but it's still kind of like it's kind of lame.
Yeah, exactly. No, I do miss that a lot actually.
Back when people cared about movies,
exactly,
churning it out like, all right, yeah, go watch it. Go watch it.
Yes, I mean, I've just been following Marvel. I mean, just the entire time, pretty much. And I just love the franchise. But even before that, reading comics or watching Marvel content outside of that, it's just always been a thing for me. So I've been, obviously super stoked for pretty much everything they have coming out. And then, like I said, then Endgame happened. We've reached the pinnacle of really what cinema can do in general, as far as like creating a narrative between.
Yeah, because the Endgame was insane.
Yeah.
23 films in. Here's this big event. It made, I think, like $1 billion in a
$2
week
billion.
or something
Right.
like that.
No, I did it really fast. Yeah, exactly.
Like, it is amazing. I remember like people selling their ticket stubs on eBay to opening night premieres for like crazy amount of money. Just so people would buy it to be like, look, I have one, because it was an event milestone.
Yeah, it was like that one was like super hard to get tickets for, and I remember like ticket size crashing, I think, too.
Dude, I remember getting tickets for that, and I remember just like sitting there and just like, gotta get them now.
So yeah, I mean, then that leads us into kind of modern, or I guess we'll go postmodern, post Endgame, and really now we're looking at the Disney Plus TV shows that have started coming out, and we're looking at really the weak Phase 4 that they've had.
Extremely weak. Like, I remember, so obviously Phase 4 was postponed. It's supposed to happen in like 2020, something like that, Black Widow. But between Endgame and Black Widow, we had New Mutants, which was a movie. I still think I gave it 4.5 stars just because I was like, I love it, but I haven't rewatched it since. But it was definitely just like, okay, here we go. They threw that at us. It was just Disney's way of being like, get rid of it. But Black Widow came out, and I remember I don't want to call it like a hush came over the land, like when it was finally happening. People were like, it's so excited for a new Marvel property, but also we had gone so long without a new Marvel property since Far From Home, so that when it finally came out, people were kind of like hesitant. It was a very somber event.
It was two things. One, it was like a couple of three things. Yeah, one, it had been a minute because of COVID and everything just since Black Widow came out. Second thing, it's Black Widow, a character we saw die.
So like people are like, well, why do we care?
Yeah, and then on the third thing is this character should have had a movie,
Honestly, Black Widow should have happened in between, like where Captain Marvel came out is where Black Widow should have come out.
Well, also, and that was another thing that I should say, this film took place before Endgame. So
it took place pre-Infinity War.
Yeah, pre-Infinity War. So it's like we're watching this film, this prequel film. Endgame happened. We had this crazy cool time, and then the next thing they put out after that is a prequel. It's
a strange placement.
It was
I still think because obviously we had Ant-Man and the Wasp come out in between Infinity War and Endgame. They should have. I know why that's an important part of the puzzle, but it feels almost like they should have put in a third. Like Black Widow should have been put in with Captain Marvel and Ant-Man. Yes, we would have had to wait longer for Endgame, but I think it would have placed Black Widow higher on a lot of people's lists, because then you would have had a movie where you got to see more of her, do her superhero stuff, see more of her background, her story, and then get her sacrifice in Endgame.
Right, I agree.
But it didn't work out that way, and it's a shame because it kind of felt like Black Widow came out, people were very disappointed.
I think I still ended up enjoying Black Widow. Really, they do like that film.
But then after Black Widow, we had a couple Disney Plus shows come out, and everybody was those were still like for a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, this entire Phase 4 has been kind of meh for everyone. I mean, for me personally, like I said, I've enjoyed everything they've put out, maybe besides Eternals.
I would say I enjoyed mostly everything. I think they definitely had their hits and they had their misses, more so misses than hits. But I still viewed it as like we're seeing a fallout. We're seeing the results of Endgame.
I think
take over the MCU, and we're seeing these characters deal with trauma and grief, and it's not that bombastic action series we grew to love.
I think we're
seeing different side of the coin.
Right. No, I definitely think that that's part of it. I think that there's really two reasons that there's been a what do you call it? Fallout, or just been a meandering up until this point. I guess COVID aside, like we can obviously
always just keep blaming COVID.
Yeah,
it's all COVID.
But I think there's two main reasons. One is the fact that I think they've started putting more content out there. Right, they're putting like triple the amount of content than they did before.
Do you think it is too much content?
Yes, from the perspective of that, I think that Kevin Feige was controlling a lot of it and was putting his touch and making sure that everything was quality, and the fact that they're putting out more means he can't be as involved in every single project, which means the quality is suffering a little bit.
I think something that also is every week almost there was Marvel stuff. like you said, like there was the Star Wars weeks where like Star Wars content would come out, so
Right.
they weren't doing it like Obi-Wan. But it felt like most of the time it was like every week at the beginning of 2022, at least for most of 2022, it was like, here's Marvel. Then you can have a drastic effect on your audience by overdoing.
Well, here's the thing:
content.
if all the content is good, people really won't care.
People won't care, but still, you gotta think. And this is something where we discussed before the shows came out. If you have an over amount of content that is so necessary for the overarching theme of the movies, or like goes in the movies where you have to watch the content on the shows to understand what's happening in the movies, how many people are actually watching the shows that are going to also watch the movies?
Right.
The average viewer is not watching 8 hours of Loki, 10 hours of, that's not happening. And then when you get things like Doctor Strange, Multiverse of Madness, where suddenly Scarlet Witch is the villain, and people that didn't see WandaVision might not understand completely why she's doing what she's doing, because suddenly she has kids. You haven't seen the show, you wouldn't know that.
That's a good point.
And something I almost didn't watch the shows. I almost chose not to.
Just for that reason?
Just to see how it would affect the movie watching experiment.
It's hard not to, because we're such fans of these things.
It is, because it's one of those things where I know people are going to be talking about it, so I want to be involved in it. But it's just also like, if I don't watch WandaVision, how will that affect my experience watching Doctor Strange? And I wanted that, but I was also like, I can't do it.
I also think it's a matter of that they're so that they're making more projects that he can't be as involved in them, and B, we're creating a bunch of projects like 10 times more than what they would have started with originally, I think, and they're not really focusing on those characters that they create. That makes sense. It's like in Iron Man, you had, if you go back to Phase 1, right? You had Iron Man, Thor, Captain America, and I think Avengers, right? Or like it was very similar.
It was Incredible Hulk too.
Right. Exactly. Like you had each of these characters, and then what happens? Then they go and join the film. Then,
Iron Man 2 was also there. So Iron Man had 2 Avengers in Phase 1.
Yeah, but I'm saying like you're focusing on it's actually exactly, you have Iron Man 2, Captain America, right? And then as you go throughout the MCU, you're very focused on these singular characters, and when they do add in other characters, they're immediately incorporated into the next project or two.
The team ups always feel very well done too, because you have all these experience with these characters.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, you get to Phase 4. Suddenly we have Shang-Chi. Well, where's Shang-Chi been since his movie?
That's what I'm saying. That's my issue with these with the newer stuff, is that they're introducing so many characters and ideas and things, and then not incorporating that back into the MCU.
Meanwhile, we have things like Yelena was in Black Widow,
right?
And then she showed up in Hawkeye. Cool,
I like that.
That's awesome. Cool. But then you have characters where they're headlining a film, Shang-Chi.
Right.
Wong's in that film. Shang-Chi isn't mentioned in the next Wong outing.
Mm-mm.
There's no. There's very thin connective layers where like Abomination's in Shang-Chi, Wong is in Shang-Chi. Wong takes Shang-Chi from the end of his movie. Then you get into She-Hulk. Abomination's there. Wong's there. No Shang-Chi mention. And it's not that we need that mentioning.
No.
It's this little things like that was why the MCU blew up in the first place, is because they had all these connective layers where you would watch the movie, you'd be like, oh, I get that.
Yeah.
I understand why that happened, but it didn't detriment your experience watching the movie.
Right. Well, and more so the fact that we've gotten Eternals, Shang-Chi, like, and in each of these films, there's some like huge secret that's like kind of changing the way that the MCU works, and then they're not addressing it in other MCU films.
Or here's another thing: post-credit scenes. They used to be a lead up to the next outing. You used to watch it, you'd be like, oh my god, we're gonna go here. Or the next character outing, I should say, because like Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 ends with Adam Warlock. Now he's the villain in Volume 3,
right?
Or etc. You get these little callbacks, and then post-credit scene, this leads to this, this leads to this. But it wasn't like you were waiting 5 years, 3 years for that post-credit scene to pay off.
Right.
Where you get things like Eternals having the Blade post-credit scene, which Blade is now in current limbo almost.
Yeah, basically.
So it's like you have this post-credit scene, you have this happening where like you tease this event, but the event's not even solidified to be happening yet.
And that's my issue, is they have all this content they're putting out, which individually have been not bad. They've been mostly, I think they've been okay, but none of them actually like still incorporate it back into this overall MCU. And it's really just like they're just creating for content. It feels like they're starting to create content for content's sake, and none of this means anything beyond just being Marvel properties.
Funny enough, though, and this is She-Hulk kind of touched on that, where She-Hulk had the whole final conversation with Kevin.
Oh, right, exactly.
It's kind of like they understand why the fan base is the way it is right now.
Yeah.
But they're really not doing anything to fix it.
You know what I'm thinking about, and the way this kind of like plays out for me is like, imagine we were reading like individual issues, like, you know, you had like Marvel was like, here's a Thor comic, and like, okay, cool, like, and here's an Iron Man comic, and then like here's an Iron Man 2 comic, and then like, okay, and then now these connect together in Avengers, like, isn't that cool? We're like, oh yeah, and then now they're like, here's 20 comics, and we're gonna figure out how they all connect together at some point.
They're like, WandaVision issue 1. Oh yeah, cool. Falcon and the Winter Soldier issue 1.
Like, they have all these open threads.
Black Widow issue 1. They're like, come on guys, like, where's the team up? There is none in this phase. What do you mean there's none? There always has a team up. No.
Okay, well, let's take some example, like another example I just thought of off the top of my head.
I will say though, No Way Home came out in phase 4.
Mm-hmm.
That was probably the highlight of it.
You know, and I really think because that felt like it was its own solid thing.
It felt like a phase 3 movie.
Well, I mean, it felt like encompassed in its own thing. It didn't necessarily, like, yeah, you had Doctor Strange in there, but like it still felt like a Spider-Man film first, before a Marvel film.
100%. Which that just goes back to our whole interconnecting movies and stories.
Which, I mean, I guess I'm not complaining that the stories aren't interconnected. I guess I'm complaining that
it's so thin.
It's like, yeah, I mean, you're...
Like we had let's say we had Miss Marvel. Miss Marvel leads to the Captain Marvel movie. Well, the Captain Marvel movie doesn't come out until next year or this year. Does Captain Marvel come out this year?
Miss Marvel comes out this year, yeah. What? The Marvels, yeah.
It's so weird to think about, but I'm also like, Moon Knight. Where's my Moon Knight season 2? Where's Moon Knight gonna show up again?
Right.
Blade?
Okay.
Where's Blade coming out?
Yeah, I mean,
we don't know.
I have 3 characters. Well, yeah, you're right. Moon Knight and I just flipped the camera off. I flipped you guys off. So you have that, or like, what about the well, I guess we did hear about her, but the Madam Hydra lady, like, I know she appeared in a few things, but like, what's her what is she doing? Like,
she just never showed back up.
Yeah, exactly.
She was like connecting WandaVision.
Speaking of WandaVision,
Loki,
White Vision, where's that dude at?
It doesn't matter.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Or like they introduced like the Eternal's hand and how that thing's sticking up out of the earth. Or
that's actually been the funniest thing to watch on like Twitter go off about. Yeah. Is they're just like, no one's gonna mention that, and everyone's just like, shut up. And it's like, it's important though.
Like, I made this for you. Shut up.
It's little things like that where the fans, like, let's say us, who have been around for years, look at this like, you're not gonna connect this anytime soon. Like, you're not gonna wrap this up and move on to the next beat. Because then think about the next Marvel outing. Mm-hmm. Ant-Man, Quantumania, Kang the Conqueror's in that. He's literally the big villain of MCU right now. We already know that because the Kang Dynasty has been confirmed as the Avengers title of Phase 6. But now, like, here he's coming, but then there's all these loose threads.
Wait, all right, give me a second here. Now, I have heard this theory, and I like it because it starts making a little bit of sense. Or, I mean, it would be super cool if they did this. Kang is a multiverse character. Some people, there's this theory out there right now that because if the reason it feels so loose threaded right now is because some of these properties are in different universes, and that they're actually going to collide. These, like, Miss Marvel might be in a different universe than She-Hulk, and She-Hulk might be in a different universe than some of this other stuff. And like the Moon Knight.
I will say Moon Knight doesn't really have any connective tissue to anything, so I'm kind of cool with it being its own thing, but I just love the character and I just want him to show back up. I just want him back. And
that, like, you know, and that we're gonna learn at some point that these are all different universes that these are happening in.
There's a comic event, Secret Wars, big event, huge event. I think that's the comic I'm thinking about.
Yeah.
Where they get the battle planet. Spider-Man gets his black suit at the planet. That's where Venom, all this big stuff in the comics. That's essentially where Kang's going to be heading people like a battle planet where we're going to get multiversal things like Tony Stark, like a new Tony Stark, and all these different things from different multiverses. Put on this planet to kind of duke it out. Essentially what I've heard. Given Marvel is very
here's my
key about everything, so who actually knows?
Here's my theory with all this. I feel like I don't think that theory is correct. I think that we're all in the same universe. However, what I think is that what's going to happen is that we're going to get this. We're going to get these films that happen right now. It's going to lead up to the next Avengers film, all the stuff that's coming out. And then Avengers is basically going to like collapse, and then the universe is going to implode on itself. And instead of Avengers and things like that, we're just going to focus on the X-Men after that. I feel like that's the next way this happens, because I feel like the X-Men is such its own big franchise that you can really just make the MCU about the X-Men the same way that Fox did.
So beginning on the X-Men part with like Disney buying Fox and having the rights to all these characters that they just get like, here you go, you own these now. What a chore that must be with the current state of the MCU, which is why I you saying they could implode and they could be unstable. That's such a huge event, like the X-Men, because it's mutants. And I know that, spoilers for Miss Marvel, she's confirmed that she's a mutant. Mm-hmm. It's such a weird thing to see them try to incorporate these characters that are such staples in Marvel Comics and such a important part for the base of Marvel Comics, and seeing them getting it so late in the game is kind of just like, it's worrisome.
Yeah.
Because you got things like Wolverine, where he's been around for hundreds of years. And then it's like, oh, yeah, he was here the whole time.
Yeah, obviously we don't know what they're going to do with that yet. And that's why my theory is, like, how do you incorporate that into the... Well, okay, here's my question. What even is the current MCU? Like, what does it look like? We don't have a Black Panther. I mean,
We have a Black Panther. It's just not something
it's not
the same. It's not that we don't like...
It's not T'Challa.
Right. It's just, it's different. It's a different...
It's not.
We could have a whole discussion on Black Panther alone.
It could, but I just meant it's not T'Challa, and I feel like even though Wakanda Forever I think was okay and pretty decent, I just don't think that she represents the character that we need.
Yeah, it's a messy situation.
Regardless, I mean that's kind of. I mean that's in limbo. Then you also don't have
You don't have
Iron
core,
Man.
Core Avengers. You don't have
we don't have our core Avengers.
Even in God, I can't remember what property was. They basically were like, yeah, the Avengers are disbanded. They're no longer a thing.
I feel like the Hulk isn't really a thing. I mean, he is. I don't know. I don't like it.
He's there, but now he has a son.
Exactly.
Who looks weird.
Exactly. Another thing that what is any of this? Like all these, they keep opening up threads and then never following up on them, which it's just so frustrating right now.
However, and I know this is something we've talked about before, because I became very disillusioned with the MCU last year. I became to the point where I was just like, I really don't care anymore. And so Mytchel had to sit down and be like, Bryce, you need to stop looking at it like they're all like this is phase 4 or phase 5. You have to look at it like this is phase 1.
Yeah.
You have to look at this in a different angle. And after you told me about that, I was like, okay, you're right. I can't compare the current state to what we saw before, especially because like as someone who wasn't there when the ground breaking of the MCU with like Iron Man and all that, who never really cared and came in so late to the game that I got to see the peak. I got to be involved in the peak of Marvel that I never had to deal with the grueling
decade of
building up. So like I didn't have I had 3 years. I had 3 years of building to get to the end game compared to people who had
that sounds amazing
10 11 years of having to wait and having to get to that ground breaking ending. And so I'm impatient. I'm like, I want it now because we're at this peak, and now I had to wait for the building and like them to slowly build up to it, and it's just it's hard to do.
It is, and honestly, in a little bit, that's actually why because I feel like that's kind of like a double-edged sword for Marvel right now is the interconnectivity, because it's so good, but it's also its detriment.
But meanwhile, you look at things like the DCEU when they tried to rush their big building.
Oh, I was about to say like the DC stuff is actually why I'm looking forward to the DC stuff a little bit more this year, like the Flash or what is it, Blue Beetle or Shazam, because those are all in their own individual stories. They're not trying to be connected to something else.
It's an interesting situation Marvel's in, but also we've seen what happens when the studio tries to build their connected universe too fast. We've seen how it fails. We've seen the Universal try to do it with the Universal Monster series.
Oh yeah, it was horrible.
Which had one movie. They had The Mummy, which bombed, and then they had already cast like Johnny Depp as the Invisible Man, all these other characters. They already had a quote unquote cast photo. It's a badly photoshopped photo where they try to put like, here's our people leading the universe, but they tried to rush it before they saw if people wanted it.
Well, I think it's because winning cures everything, right? And I think if these Marvel films or that Universal Monster film or even Batman vs Superman or Justice League, if those films were great, nobody would care. And nobody would care that that's not interconnected, or or maybe we would talk about it, but I feel like it wouldn't be as big of a deal as it is.
So let's use this as an example. Man of Steel. Everyone regarded it as an amazing Superman movie. Brought back the character to the big screen. Then the next movie was Batman v Superman. And they killed Superman off. Yeah,
that's an issue.
That is them being like, oh, crap, we got to catch up to the Avengers, so let's just pop, pop, pop. It's like, no, you should have done a Batman movie, that you should have done a Cyborg movie, or you should have done a Flash movie.
I don't necessarily...
up to the Justice League, not just pop, pop,
See, I don't necessarily agree with that. I think that they can go to a Batman versus Superman, or they can go to a Justice League. I don't think you have to start with you have to start by doing individual films. And the reason I just think that if you made a good film, because I don't think Batman versus Superman was that great of a film. I know that there are people out there that think it was good.
People will say it depends on the cut you watch.
I
think that is a
Batman versus Superman, but Justice League, I watched both of them. I just thought I didn't really think either worked.
Yeah, then you think about things where here's where we're getting off topic of Marvel, but that's okay.
Yeah.
But when you look at James Gunn, and this is why my favorite thing of people being like James Gunn's ruining the DCE, or James Gunn just needs to keep things going the way they are. What have been the highest properties in the DCEU that's not Wonder Woman?
Suicide Squad, probably, right?
The Suicide Squad.
You didn't make it funny. Well, I mean, that was actually, speaking of James Gunn, if we're talking about just building a team out of nowhere, Guardians of the Galaxy.
This is why this man has so much faith with a lot of people like me, where we view it and we're like, okay, so we've seen what you've done with Guardians of the Galaxy, and he's done movies like Slither, and all this. Like, we've seen him do these movies. He's a great director. He's a good story builder,
right?
And seeing him do like Guardians of the Galaxy, bring these characters from basically obscurity into the big screen household names. Then you see him do the Suicide Squad after getting fired from Marvel, which that's a whole other topic in itself. But he did the Suicide Squad, and he brought back this squad that everyone hated because their movie in 2016 was ass.
And he made a well-loved movie.
And he made a great, funny movie because he understands how comic book movies should work.
Right.
And then he makes Peacemaker, one of the funniest comic book shows ever made.
Mm-hmm.
And people are saying like he doesn't know what he's doing. Like, dude obviously knows what he's doing if he can bring these properties back from destruction. And
actually, we're going to be talking about that next week. So if you want to hear more about our thoughts on DC, then cause we're going to be talking about our thoughts on DC and everything next week. So and it's hard. It's almost hard to not talk about Marvel, DC when we're talking about Marvel too, because they're all kind of interconnected. In our love for them, but
it's amazing that like Marvel has become such a staple in industry, where we have people like Martin Scorsese saying they're not real movies, but then seeing this huge fan base,
and yet they're on the top of the box office. Okay,
all the time,
I would say this. I'll say that I think right now it's a little tumultuous with just how we feel about it and the projects they're putting out. But I feel like in another 5 years, after we get another 5 years down the road, I think we're gonna be back in shape.
I think, yeah, like we said earlier, it's all about starting over. They have to restart from phase one basically, and build its universe back up to create that big event movie like Endgame again. And people who went through Endgame and was like, it's only up from here. I was like, it's only going to go up from here. It's hard for the people to have to sit there and watch it build up again.
Yeah. Well, that's why I'm saying, like, what do you do after Kang Dynasty, right? What do you do after that? Like, you go to the multiverses and like collapse the entire multiverse. Like, the only thing you can do after that is
they had it on the Legend, not the Legends Tomorrow, the DC shows with the Flash, where they had like the big event where everything just kind of collapsed.
Yeah. The Crisis on Infinite Earths.
That's essentially where you're saying it's going to go, is where everything's just going to go like, oh, we have all these multiverses. Oh, they're all in the same world now.
100%. Yeah.
It's such. You know why I love things like Blade or like the darker side of Marvel? You cannot tell me that Peter Parker wouldn't have noticed there's vampires. Like he would not know. There's no way. So it's believable that there could be a whole underworld of Marvel where you have like the normal superhero stuff up here that we've all grown accustomed to, and then below it you have like Blade doing his thing, and Moon Knight doing his thing. You have all these little vigilante things. Daredevil. It's still
I love Daredevil.
Street level type stuff.
Okay, that one I'm super excited for.
It has so many episodes.
I know. That's why I like it. Yes, a full season of television.
But you got all these little like street level things. I'll say Blade is street level, but that feels so much more realistic than like you have Iron Man flying through the air being like, oh look, there's a vampire. They wouldn't have noticed. So I like this whole little like area of Marvel where it's you have the stuff we know, and then you have the deeper level where it's the darker side where they were just like, yeah, Peter Parker would not be involved with the vampire stuff going down. He has his own things going on, Vulture, and other things. The vampires are doing their thing with Blade.
That's fair. No, you're right.
And that's why I always loved Blade, because it just felt low under the radar. It's believable to me that people would not notice that.
100%.
So I'm so excited for Blade because they don't need to connect to the bigger things. Blade can be doing his own thing. And it doesn't have to connect. You can be in the same world and it doesn't have to connect.
I can't wait to see what they do with, I forget what this character's name is, but Jon Snow.
Black Knight.
Yeah, Black Knight.
Once again, there's a tease that you heard Mahershala Ali's voice, and then that's so far.
Kit Harington, that's the name. But yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, well, we kind of. I mean, there's a whole mess behind Blade, behind like canceling directors and scrapping the script.
It makes me so sad.
That was me saying that Kevin Feige is not having a direct hand in all these films, and that's why it got that bad. Is where we almost got a bad Blade movie from Marvel. We almost did because they were like a week before going into production before they shut it down.
It's gotta be hard.
I mean, I'm glad that they did because
I did hear that they're starting to think about what's the word?
Condense?
Not condense, because that's bringing stuff tighter. They're trying to air things out more. There's going to be like, oh, we're going to spend more time between projects to try to get like better effects or better. Because think about like one of the biggest things I can think of against Marvel for me last year, Thor: Love and Thunder.
Yeah,
those VFX looked rough. Like I know they were pushing for it to get nominated for best special effects at the Oscars. The whole floating head thing with like Heimdall's son, that looks terrible. That looks awful. Things like Wakanda Forever, where part of the reason I didn't like it as much is because it just looked so fake. Like I was like, I expected more out of Marvel. And since She-Hulk poked fun at it, where like last episode they were like, we can't do more because we have another project going on. They had the Wakanda Forever theme.
Yeah,
it's like little things like that. They understand why people are mad. Like they get it. But I feel like they're going to try to do better.
Yeah, I agree.
A whole year of them being like, they were top dogs. They were the studio. Everyone was like, Marvel, Marvel, Marvel. And now people are like, Marvel, like, you know.
I mean, like I said, also, it's also a matter of, when you go to the peak of something, if there's no more but down at first. You have to go down at first, right? So, I mean, I think we'll get back to there.
Just a slow climb back.
And honestly, I've enjoyed most of the projects they put out too. So I mean, it's not like I'm complaining about anything.
There's only been like one or two projects where I'm like, I will never want to rewatch that. But it's not. Yeah. It hasn't been anything where I've been like, wow, you guys really lost your touch. It's just we expect more.
Exactly. Well, what do you guys think of Marvel? Are you disappointed by anything that's happened Phase 4, anything recently, or are you excited for the future?
Give us your ranking of all the Phase 4 properties.
Yes, I would love to see.
I'm honestly very excited.
I would love to see that. So yeah, I'm super excited for the future of Marvel and where it can go. Next week,
it can only go up from here.
It can only go up, exactly. Next week, we're going to talk about what are we talking about next week?
We're talking about Malcolm X,
and then our thoughts on the DCU. So I cannot wait to get into that.
Wait for this. We have a week. I'm gonna rewatch all the DCU movies.
Watch all the DC films.
I'm gonna rewatch them all.
I guess there's not that many.
Wait till I watch Justice League and then follow it up with Zack Snyder's Justice League just for the spite.
Yeah, well, honestly, Zack Snyder's Justice League is good though.
It is good. I just haven't seen those in a while, so I don't know. I feel like that would be
fun.
I feel like we're gonna talk about DC. I should rewatch them, especially because like I need to rewatch Shazam and stuff. So I might as well.
All right, guys. Well, I do appreciate you guys' time, and thank you for spending it with us. If you want to follow us and our movie-going adventures, you can find the podcast at Into the Filmverse or at Into the Filmverse podcast, where you are listening or watching. And
don't forget to check out our YouTube channel for our reviews of Megan and A Man Called Otto.
Exactly. And if you want to follow me and my adventures online, you can find me at Movie Mitch on Letterboxd. Mitch Reviews. At Mitch Reviews.
Like, you changed
I have
it?
too many things, man. At Mitch Reviews on Letterboxd and at Mytchel Chandler anywhere else, and Mytchel is spelled Mytchel.
And you can find me on Letterboxd at Paid Reviews and on Twitter at Sanguine Films until I figure out how to change it. I've been trying to. It's hard. It's hard because I want it all to be uniform. But it just somebody already took it and they haven't posted anything in like 7 years, and I'm just like,
rude.
Bruh.
Awesome. Well, I do appreciate you guys' time, and until next time,
Excelsior!